I am Annie Farrar, and I am the chairperson for the Washington Sculptors group. And I would just some little housekeeping notes to get us started. I think if you can put your settings on speaker view, that will be a more pleasant way to view this, because we are not on a webinar account, because there will be sort of an after event where people can talk to each other and chat. Washington Sculptors Group, for those of you who are new to us, we just celebrated our 35th anniversary, and I'm excited for our 40th coming up. We are a membership organization with over 400 members, mostly sculptors. We promote an exchange of ideas among sculptors, collectors, and the public, and other arts professionals. This is our first professional development program of 2021, but this is a new series we've been running during the pandemic, which has been really great to get to reach out to so many people around the world, and our local DC folks. We're glad you are here for this program, which is documenting your work for exhibitions and collecting legacy with Cheryl Edwards and Helen Frederick. And we are very happy to welcome all of our members and everything. And it's a panel presentation and conversation. So the format is going to be we're going to have Cheryl and Helen present, and then we'll have a question session. And then after that, we're going to have open it up for people to chat. So looking forward to that. Our moderator tonight is Joan Weber, and she has been on the board for many years. She is our collector on the board, so which is great to have her insight. And she's a business person, so she taught for 11 years at the university level and built her own printing machinery export business with her aunt, and for 23 years was a sales VP in a large printing company here in the DC area, but for the last 15 years has been working in commercial real estate development. And as you know, and so I'm going to turn it over to Joan now. So Joan, it's for you.
Thank you, Annie. Annie, there? Okay.
Yep, you're on, Joan.
Okay. I just want to say, some of you may know, I'm not seeing, but as some of you may know, Eric Solerier, and as Annie mentioned, Eric Solerier and I have been presenting a series of programs, professional development programs for WSG, for the Washington Sculptors Group. And most of those have been directed for our members in terms of whatever stage of their careers they are in. And the thought was that this topic tonight, we had one program also with Robin Moore about working with creating planning for estates. And some people might think that tonight's program is for mature or senior artists. And our thought is that it's actually for every stage of careers, because the early adoption of these disciplines into one's art practice really, really helps. It would be easier if you have the organization to apply for grants or jobs or exhibitions or representation even. If the information that you have about your career and your work is organized, documented, and accessible. It also allows you rich access to an integrated view of your whole career, of all of your work. I'm sort of seeing myself as frozen. Is this, are you?
You're not frozen, Joan.
I'm not, okay. Yeah. You're frozen for me, but as long as I'm not frozen for you.
I just turned my camera off, so it's not distracting.
Thank you. I went over to a speaker's view, to a gallery view, so we could. And then we realized as we were working on this program that this is really not just for artists. As a collector, and I shared with the group, and I thought I brought it here today. Yes, I did. And we all laughed, and I said, don't laugh at me, please. That very early on, and this goes back to 1994, I couldn't keep track of my magazine subscriptions. I know most people have that problem that after you subscribe 6 months early, they say you need to resubscribe, your subscription is up. And I used to get very upset about that. So I decided to write it down inside a file folder when my subscription was and when I should renew. And it ended up, for some reason, I don't know if you can see this, but any piece of art I ever bought and any magazine subscription, don't ask me why those two got combined, ended up in what became an ongoing portfolio that lists the name of the work, the name of the artist, the size of the piece, the material, because there was an immediacy to it, and I knew I could keep track of it that way. And so every piece of either object of art, sculpture, or painting, and magazine subscriptions are in this file folder. And no matter how so don't laugh at me, but it works, because when I want it, no matter how else I will manage to document the work in my collection, the background of it is this wonderful file folder that's got the handwritten entry of what it was and where it came from. So it's not just for artists. I've told Cheryl and Helen, I'm going to be listing myself very closely tonight. I wanted to share another personal story just very quickly that it drove home the need as we get older for doing the work that they're both going to be talking about tonight. It was a personal story that I was sitting at. Some of you know my sister lived on an art ranch in Oracle, Arizona, which was a dude ranch bought by very young junior people at the University of Arizona Art Department in Tucson, 30 miles out of Tucson, an 80-acre ranch in the mountains. And it became the ranch that actually Andy Warhol did a lot of his filming on. And I was sitting at the table, my sister's kitchen table many years ago, when Miriam Shapiro, I don't know if any of you know of Mimi Shapiro, was there. She was in her 80s. She's a very well-known artist and very well-known feminist artist who was very, very active with Judy Chicago and a number of the other active feminists in the 70s and 80s. And she was in tears. She was sobbing at this table, and she said that her dealer had been hounding her recently. She was in her 80s because her dealer had asked her to call museums to place her work, to continue her legacy. And she hadn't done that, and she didn't know how to do it. And she was so distressed because she said, I just don't know how to begin. I'm a painter, I'm an artist. What do I know about selling my work to museums or having them be aware of my work? And my heart went out to her that somebody as established and well-known would have such distress in her age about what was going to happen to her work. And so when we started discussing this program, I became excited that the more we can do and educate ourselves about how to prepare our archives and our information about our work, that would be very important. Cheryl, this conversation actually started with Cheryl and me, and Cheryl had been a fellow, an awarded fellow of a group called Art Cart. Art Cart is, we're not sort of selling Art Cart tonight, and it's actually not relevant for the moment for the visual arts because they are working with the performing arts. But Cheryl was the second in the cohort group and one of 10 area artists awarded an Art Cart fellowship through the Research Arts and Culture Organization of Columbia University. And the Art Cart became a program that was founded by a woman named Joan Jeffrey of this Research Center for the Arts as an interdisciplinary, intergenerational educational experience to connect aging professional artists with teams of graduate and undergraduate students to undertake the preservation of the artist's creative work. That's a big mouthful, that's a big sentence. And there's a big story attached to it. But the learnings are about how to respect your own career and how to respect your own work and how to document your career and your work in a way that others can receive and use and make good of. Apparently, Art Cart grew out of research that Joan Jeffrey and the Cornell sociologist Douglas Heckathorn did that revealed that 61% of professional visual artists, this was in New York City artists, senior artists, 62 and plus, had made no preparation for their work after death. 95% had not archived their work. 97% had no estate plan. 75% had no wills. and 1 out of 5 had no documentation for their work at all. So part of what tonight's conversation is for Cheryl and Helen to communicate to us what that documentation should look like. And again, the thinking is the earlier you start including this in your discipline, in your art discipline, in your practice, the easier it will be all the way through your career. So tonight's panelists need very little introduction, but I will do an introduction for the moment for Cheryl. Born in Florida, Cheryl began her art studies in 1988 at the Art Student League in New York, studying with Ernest Critchlow. Cheryl's primarily a painter, printmaker, and has exhibited widely in the DMV, in New York, and in Europe, and in the Far East. She's received many awards, including 2 fellowship awards from the DC Commission on the Art and Humanities, separately in 2015 and 2021. Cheryl was also an awardee of the Art Cart project, Saving the Legacy, which experience resulted in the archiving of her artwork in the Academic Commons Columbia University archives, which has taught her much about creating the legacy, which is the heart of her talk this evening. Cheryl is very active in this community, is on several boards, and we're very happy to say that she's actively on the WSG advisory board. Her complete biography is in a more complete biography. It's just still an abbreviated one. Is in the announcement of tonight's program, and Cheryl is represented by Gabby Mises Fine Art. So Cheryl, the program is yours.
Hello, everyone. First, I want to thank the Washington Sculptors Group, and I want to thank the members for allowing me to share my thoughts. And I want to thank everyone for taking the time out to come on and listen to us, because we are just about zoomed up. But I'm going to just share some of my experiences while I was in that fellowship for 9 months and what it takes to document your work. You may look at me, I'm 66, I'll be 67 next week, and you'll say, okay, this is for seniors. No, you need to start from day one, because if you become my age and you start this project, it becomes daunting. It becomes very, very difficult. And I say this up front to people. They said, why? It's good for museums, but you should do this for yourself and for your art. You should care that much about your art to do it, because nobody else can do it for you the way that you can do it. So at this point, I'm going to share the screen. And we're going to get started. So we'll be talking about legacy and documentation. I'll be talking about the grunt work, and what you're going to hear from Helen is she's going to show you what she actually had to do for 2 years to prepare for a museum show. Why is it necessary to document your work? Why is that necessary? If you do not think about creating your own art story and you're the one that lived it, I'm not sure how anyone else can do that with the intent that you would want it to be preserved. So you need that. It should be your artwork that we all leave behind when we transition becomes a part of our estate. And we should have our art as well as our other personal belongings in order. The things that we may have in our possession that need to be copyrighted, we need to do so. And those kind of things could be anywhere from books to photographs to a number of items. You should take care of that. And it's very easy to do that here in DC, down at the Library of Congress. Artwork is a valuable asset. You may say, well, I'm painting and I'm not famous, but you are still relevant. And it is a valuable asset because it's part of your story, your life, and a visual property that you're leaving behind. Art on the total whole is valuable, and commodities, as you know, on Wall Street, people are buying it. You see this at the large auctions. But it's something that we should hold precious, and it's something that we've spent all that time painting our intent, giving of ourselves. We as artists are the ones that have to take care of it. you remember the story about Jackson Pollock painting, and those of you that didn't know, this painting was found in a garage in Arizona years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago. And the owner had very little money. The owner didn't even know that she had a Jackson Pollock. It was stacked up against the wall. And they spent, I think one museum, they spent millions of dollars to get it authenticated, to determine by experts whether or not it was a real Pollock. And after all of that was said and done, I think I read somewhere they spent like $50,000 to do the authentication, and they valued that particular painting at $15 million. The woman had no idea. And my great question is, how did it get there? How did it end up there, out of his estate? The David Driscoll Center, the archive is phenomenal. David Driscoll's archives are phenomenal. And that's some places that's really local to us if you want to see what archiving is. Also, the Faith Ringgold papers are there too. This is what's included. There's a picture of David with Alma Thomas and a picture with David and Clementine Hunter. There are all kinds of documents and items that make up your archive. Here's a letter that David Driscoll received from Ramir Bearden. That's part of his archives. They were friends. Part of my archive is something that I just discovered just the other day because I moved out of my studio, so I'm still organizing things. But when I was in New York City living and practicing as an attorney and going to art school, I belonged to a legal organization, the National Conference of Black Lawyers, and we did co-fundraising with artists. And we did an art auction at New York University. This was in the 80s. And I didn't realize there were about 50 artists that we had organized. And I didn't realize that we had until I found this book, I didn't remember that we had the artwork of Alger Collins, Dalwood Bay, and Camilla Billups. And I was just struck, and I said this, and then I looked at the prices that we were auctioning their work off at then and the value of their artwork today. That is like a quick example of why you need to organize your things. So what's included in the documentation and archival artwork is your inventory, your paintings, your catalogs, your announcements, any writing, scholarship. All of this is important if others are interested in you and institutions are interested in you and interested in you in terms of your work. Those are the underpinnings that would make that translation of what you're communicating with and where your work has been, if it is already organized. So these are photos of me and my intern a year ago, and what we were doing. I have over 200 images documented and archived at Columbia University, and I have the capability of going up to 1,000. And so I was doing the next batch of the last 2 years with the intern. And so we were organizing the prints, this limited edition prints, so I knew how to word that in the database. So what this documentation consists of: photographs of your work. They don't have to be professional photographs. They need to be a photograph, an image, so that if someone sees the title of a work and wants to know what that looks like, that there is an image that exists. You need documentation for exhibits and your exhibits that you have participated in. The records, the shipping records of the artwork. I was told, because we spent a day at the Phillips Collection, and they were talking to us as a part of the cohort of the importance of this. They say, do not scan everything. Do not throw away any piece of paper. The shipping records of when artwork is being shipped to an exhibit, any document that pertains to that. Catalogs, any publications written about you or your work, any correspondence that you've had with other artists or other art entities. That becomes really important. Photographs should be, if you can, they should be detailed images and they should be crisp and sharp. And you can mostly, if you don't get a professional photographer to do that, those of you that are adept with the newer iPhones, they make great photographs. I do not photograph anything well, at all. So photography should be professional, should be 3 detailed. And as sculptors, you have 3D artwork. So therefore it should be more than one image of your work so that a viewer can get the full breadth and scale of what you have created. Your exhibit announcements should be saved. If you don't want to save all that paper, although I think that you should at least scan it and put it in a folder where it would be accessible by date, chronological date. Announcements for openings, that's all documentation. Artist talks, and particularly now, since we're living in the world of the virtual world, where artists are participating in many artist talks. And so you have the capability of having those videos. That's documentation. Installation openings, photographs, artist talks. Photos of the openings. It preserves that point in time and that moment and date when you actually did something with your work at a specific place. It becomes important. Catalogs. This is the catalog from the art cart project. It was the catalog from the exhibit at the Katzen Museum. So, when I talk about the art cart project and the fellowship, and I talk about the exhibit to perhaps a gallery owner or a curator, I said, well, this is the catalog that resulted from that, so they can get a visual of what the work looked like that was put in that particular show, but also to just be part of your archives. I was told today, speaking with a fellow colleague of mine, and she said there's a retired archivist, and his special project over the last 5 years, he is documenting all of the African-American art catalogs that he can get his hand on from a time certain up to now. Publications, if there've been any articles or any blogs or newsletters that your work or you've been featured in, you should keep that. If you have any book covers, your work has been on an image of a book cover. If you can get the book, that would be great, but keep that information and organize it by year and month. And a title of the image that was used for that purpose. Magazines, if your artwork, I found that there's been a lot of online magazines during this time that we've been in isolation. And that is a way interdisciplinary people have submitted, and I submitted work to Montana Mouthful, and it was a literary magazine. And so that work was matched with the poet's work, and it was a 60-page magazine. That becomes documentation. Art reviews, your Washington Post reviews, your East City art reviews, whatever city you may find yourself, anything that was written about your work, you need to have that, and you need to file that away in an orderly fashion. Correspondence, this is just an example. This is a letter from David Driscoll's archives, and it's a letter that he received from Jacob Lawrence. They were friends. That was in 1987. So you never know, what significance that what you have may become important in the future. So we were given part of this fellowship. It was a 9-month program, and it was not easy. I had an assistant and an intern, and I could have used 3 more people, to be honest, because it's a lot of work, because I was 62 when I did this. So I was documenting 32 years of work And it's a software that's not very user friendly and pretty old. So they didn't have the drop down. You had to input every piece of data separately. And so we received that software. It was called Embark as a part of the fellowship. The software could cost anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000, and it's old. But the reason why they use it, this is the very same software that is used at the Metropolitan Museum. So therefore, your archives could speak to their computer system if you ever got, that far or any kind of opportunity to share your work and to share something about yourself. But I think that, because technology changes so very quickly, I'll give you a very good example. I got the Embark software. I refused to buy the maintenance for $1,200 a year. But then I remembered that, it's only going to work on this older laptop. I had to buy a new laptop last year because my hard drive crashed. And although it was saved and uploaded, when I tried to use it on a new computer, Embark doesn't work. I have to now pay $1,200 to get an upgrade so it can speak to my computer. So I mean, I wouldn't force myself to try to do anything like that. I think a simple Excel spreadsheet will be sufficient, particularly if you have not started any of this. And you just label your columns accordingly with the data. You can see from this screen, they ask us a whole lot of things. Your medium, what was the support, the media and support, any other object type comments. And in the comments, that's where I put in what exhibits a particular work have been shown in, or I would put in the ownership of that particular artwork if I remembered or had it. Anything, what region was it shown in? Where were you located? What county, what state, what country? Those things are all the little nitty bitty things, and perhaps a thumbnail photo of the image on a separate document corresponding to your Excel spreadsheet. So what we had to do, we had to input all of the information on those data drop downs that I just showed you. And so at that point, we had to convert the file to a CVS file in order to send it to Columbia University so that it could speak to their system, which was somewhat different than the Embark system. And this is what happens when you do a conversion, and that's how they read all that information that you put in all those data fields on the prior file. They're different. And then when you go into academic commons, if you were to try to research my work, you would then see the subjects that is listed under artists, art, women's artists, painting, older artists, and arts. There's a file here where the object record code, which is all of that Greek looking code I just showed you, and then the actual images are in another folder there. They also they did our oral history, so that's also loaded there. And so this is what it looks like. You'll see so part 2 was what the latest edition that I sent to them last year for the new work of the last 2 years. But this is what it looks like if you go into Columbia Academic Commons, you type in my name, you Google, and my history of my practice will come up in the forms of oral history, images, and a catalog with titles and description and all of that. This is what it looks like within the system when you research, and if you were to click on one thumbnail, and then it enlarges. But this is how all of my work is saved in that archival system. So I think that, it's daunting to think about it, but it's necessary. It's as necessary as, you know, putting gesso on a canvas if you're painting in oil before you, a raw canvas before you paint. Just whatever you do basically in sculpture before you can do anything else. It's that important. So that if you start now, then you will start remembering other things, you know, as you go along. I mean, my saving grace was that I always had a website. It wasn't the best, but I had this website and I used that as a way of keeping up with what I had and titles. And so that's what helped my process with my intern and my assistant during this time, because God knows I couldn't remember everything from 20 and 30 years ago. And so I just want to leave you with that you really need to start considering it, because if you really sat down and thought about it, there's no one else that can do this properly but you as the artist. Your legacy is your art story. It's your evolution. It's your art's value. It's everything about you and your story. So I would encourage you to organize that yourself. Start now and take a stab at it. Thank you very much.
Cheryl, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you. What we thought we would do is hold your question. We invite you to, if you have any questions along the way, to please write them into the chat function. And then after Cheryl and Helen both present, then we'll have lots of time to address the questions. Annie will read your questions that you've written down, and we would love to have some written questions from you. And the other thought, as I was listening to it, is the detail. Once you start, I know from my own experience. I know my Cheryl. I know from. Is the echo still there? Okay. I know from my own experience, and why I brought up my file folder is it sounds daunting, and as I also have collected odd pieces of paper and the framing documentation around it, as I was listening to you, there was so many things that were going on in my brain about what one could do. The object is not to get daunted, but just to get started. And I think the simplest starts is to open your file folder, go back to your history, and just start writing it down or entering it into a simple database. And as I think we'll make some suggestions, maybe from the audience, of other forms of data collection that could be useful. Gallerists have some, and there are others for collectors and others for artists. But it is an important thing that I can think of to do. Our next speaker, Helen Frederick, is also very well known to many of you. Helen is an alumnus of the Rhode Island School of Design. She's recognized as a distinguished artist, curator, educator, and coordinator of international projects. Helen is the founder of Pyramid Atlantic, a center for art printmaking, hand papermaking, and the art of the book. She's an activist. She's on many boards of organizations, both local and national, including the College Art Association. Her work has been exhibited in many major museums, including the Phillips Collection, the Museum of Modern Art in Kyoto, Japan, among many others. And her work is in the collection of the Whitney Museum, the Brooklyn Museum of Art, the National Gallery of Art here in DC, the Library of Congress, and the Smithsonian American Art Museum, among many others. She's received numerous awards and is featured in the Feminist Art-Based Archive at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. Her Reading Road studio in Silver Spring provides collaborative opportunities for artists interested in works in and on paper, constructions, artist books, and critical conversations about social justice, cultural, and visual literacy. Helen is an organizational curator of Kala Chopal Trust, New Delhi, India, and is a professor emeritus of art at George Mason University. And again, her more complete biography even though that is an abbreviated one, is in the announcement. And we are honored to have Helen join this program. Helen.
Thank you, Joan, and thank you, Cheryl, for inviting me to do this for the Washington Sculptors Group. And I hope I'll have something of interest for you all tonight to listen to. As my friend Tara in New York says so well, I have two bodies, the physical body and the body of my work. And I know both need to be protected and consistently cared for, preserved, and documented under the umbrella of a studio or and an archive. Tonight, I think I will develop some major exhibition opportunity by defining my steps of inquiry, research, structure, collaboration, and documentation. So you're going to see some art from me. And being part of Maryland and the DMV history, and also globally, I'm aware of myself at the time I'm in, the urgency, and the crisis of what's going on in the very short span of my life. This COVID year, I lost a major museum exhibition and my studio was destroyed by a storm in December. The process of rebuilding has become a major part of my documentation. So I'm going to show you some eye candy. I'm calling this little talk Portals and Presentations. I have spent quite a bit of time in India and thinking about how that has related to my entry into the art world after Rhode Island School of Design. So for me, the portals that I think about in relation to what I'm leaving behind relate to how I do any exhibit, how I work with curating an exhibit, how I work with a community. And that is, there's portals that I must do, unpack data, do research, think about the small and the large considerations, think about it objectively, subjectively, think about who I'm going to collaborate with, what the collaboration will be like, then go into the studio, what are those investigations, refine and correlate that, and then the documentation. So for me, experimentation and acquired knowledge is a very big part of what I do with my own work and with others. So I have found flax to be a really versatile, incredible material in sculpture. I thought you'd like to see that as a sculptor group. Some of you know about it, you've seen my work or others, but it acts like a skin, which is also part of the body that I'm protecting and preserving and documenting. And I use certain preparation, pigmenting, shrinkage. And I'm a real fan of a book that you may want to look at, because as expressed in that book, The Hand by Frank Wilson, the hand shapes the brain, language, and human culture. It's not that the brain conducts and makes us use our hand in a certain way. It's quite the opposite is what he's saying. And I think that's not only true, I experience this when I work in the studio. So I feel that my hand shapes what I'm doing in terms of my work. So this is some of the flax. Of course, it's extremely hard to photograph and document. So one of the problems we all have, right, is how does a live work of art look when you take it into documentation? A friend of all of ours, Elsa B. Johnson, threw out a really interesting project for me with the flax. She works with, as you know, organic insects, the silkworms, as her system. And she asked if I would make something and see if it would challenge the silkworms, which usually go around the circle. And so I pierced these words through the flax, show mercy, to see if the silkworms might go in and out of the piercings. And they didn't. So you could still hold up the piece and still see the language. That propelled me into thinking about piercing a lot of flax and creating sculptures as the flax dried. There you see my little studio assistant Marmalade, always with me. And so these works then became, through drying, dimensional. And I have a lot of risk in doing that, right? A lot of things go into the trash. I never know exactly what's going to happen. So again, when you think about documenting, is it important to show your test? I think it is. Is it important to show your process? I think it is. I was invited through the fledgling nonprofit College Chapal to India in 2017 to be a curator and join the trustees, and also to be an exhibiting artist. So I knew in 10 days residency with 42 international artists, I wouldn't have a lot of time to do work. So I made all my work before, folded it down, put it in my suitcase, and took it with me. What you see in my hand there is a sand casting. What you see on the floor are 4 by 8 foot sheets of paper. And after the piercing, I started to distress and burn and alter the work. So the installation was at the Kalakendra Museum, a beautiful museum. It was called Our Body and Hands in Water. And we were dealing in Rajasthan with a desert society that has trouble with water. So I was given 2 interns, and I asked them to pierce the paper for me in this large black sheet. They pierced many images. This one had a flame behind it. And then I knew this was going to be installed in the museum in large windows, so there would be backlight. I don't know if you can see on the right, I think it's covered by us, but that was the test before I did the burning. So with my finger, just one at a time, did I make these holes. It wasn't a machine. And that makes a difference. So forgive me for the slides, but it's very hard to take. I know I can't take well backlit photographs. So this is just from my phone, but you see the scale. The windows were 25 feet high, and each one of these was 8 feet. So that was part of the installation. Before I went to India in 2017, I was very honored to be invited to do a show for intersections at the Phillips, and it was called Acts of Silence. And when you go through the intersections program, you're asked to respond to the space or a philosophy or an artist. And I responded to Morris Lewis, who spent 32 years of his last life in Lolita, Northern California. Now, he is an example of someone who didn't document very well his work. And I'm afraid to tell you, I'm pretty much in his league. I have a lot of work to do. But what I did learn from seeing his site was the resonance of why he did his work. Why did he draw these birds that he did in the middle of the night? What were the sounds he was listening to? And I'd never seen the redwoods. I'd never seen this primordial forest. So this was another part of the brain that was going to affect my hand, right? And or my hand affecting my brain. And these works were all made by dipping wire into flax, by forming flax over a circular plastic globe. And this piece is about 18 feet long that hung in the stairwell so that you would see these shadows, sort of like the foreboding I felt when I went into these primordial forests. And using a lot of color in this particular piece, so it would feel like what was hanging in the forest. So come next then to the really interesting documentation part of this talk is that Jack Rasmussen invited Yoriko Yamaguchi, myself, and Michael Pestel. Yoriko and Michael are 2 amazing sculptors. I've known them 40 years. And we decided to collaborate on a show, and after many months of discussion, came up with the title Paradox. And that it was going to show large-scale paperworks. It was relating to contradictory interrelated elements that exist simultaneously and persist over time. It was definitely talking about climate crisis. And we had all kinds of ideas for the entire first floor and the sculpture court, major scale sculptures. And they were all about enclosure, erasure, fragmentation, and very nuanced ways of working together with text elements and other different kinds of aesthetic identities. So what I first did, because I'm pretty organized, is I made this Excel sheet of preparation, formalizing the themes and well, who is going to be the audience, what donors will we need, because Katzen asked the artists to help with funding the show. You can either travel the work or you can have a catalog. You have to make choices of where you're going to put what they have in their budget and how you will accommodate the budget. And then there was the installation. So can you see all the way over to the right on your screens? Because I have, yeah, thank you. So I have the preparation, and the timing was, confirming the exhibition intentions, identifying the major players, the curators, the interns, photographers, writers, preparing a budget, conferring all the details with the museum or gallery, if it was, make a record of the conservation suggestions, which is very important when you're dealing with any work, but particularly works of paper. How are you going to deal with that conservation knowledge for the buyer? And then formalizing the themes, drafting the statements, collecting the email list, detailing a timeline, delegating tasks. You all probably know about all this. I just put it in an Excel sheet for you to see. Confirm storage if needed, document the studio progress with videos. So if you go on my new website, readingroadstudio.com, which was made specifically for this show when it was canceled, so I made documentation because it was canceled, you will see 2 videos there. And then instead of a catalog, we did an artist book, which I'm going to show you. Installation was determining, again, how do you move it there? How do you ship it? How do you align with the gallery installers? How do you have all your statements ready? And coordinating volunteer help, which in our case would have been extremely important between Michael's 30-foot cage and Yoriko's sculptures. And then afterwards, you know, sending out the thank yous. Are you going to travel it? Have you worked with that early on in the beginning, or is that a nomenclature? Continue online, showcasing the work and the story's responsibilities. I'm sure there could be more in here. This is just the basic needs I felt we had to go over as 3 people working on a show. So we took the floor plan. I was working on a lot of research. One of the books I recommend to you is Visual Complexity, Mapping Patterns of Information by Manuel Lima. It's about 10 years old now, I think, 8 to 10 years. And you realize how complex you are as a sentient being. And when you're working with 2 other people, that becomes a little bit important because you have to compare and share how you're going to install and document and what part of that will be useful to each artist. So this was our floor plan with Eureka coming in the beginning, and then Michael's 30-foot sculpture and my work behind it, which was 400 sheets of paper, some of them printed. And then going out in the sculpture court, we were going to do the word paradox in 16-foot letters, and they were going to be upside down. I mean, all of it was very timely with the election. And of course, it didn't happen. So I work a lot with the community, and in this show, I decided to do that even more. I sent out a questionnaire, 3 questions about the biosphere and what are we doing with runaway population growth and nuclear threat, how can we intervene, and what's your personal symbolic language? All questions centering around the Anthropocene and destabilization. And I had wonderful, wonderful respondents. Cheryl was one of them, thank you. And many people in the DMV. And what I did then was make thin sheets of flax paper that I could run through my computer using black and red as the text and running together everybody's answers. And so when it came time to mount this, it was COVID. There was no one else to help me. And I was very nervous about doing this, but I managed to do this 48 by 48 inch piece. And the drawing that you see is a maze, not a labyrinth. So it's a little harder to get through for obvious reasons. I wanted that to be part of the theme. And I scored it with a bone folder so the flax would allow the drawing to become white. And then I made these ellipses and I wrapped the words from the respondents on the ellipse looking like something that would hang over a shrine or could be a shifting kind of pattern in nature.
Blah, 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 blah.
Should I stop? Is everybody okay?
I'm really sorry. Somebody was
Okay.
not muted.
These are the witness wall lithographs of people in my community. And I have altered their faces with water. You can see Cheryl in the middle of the yellow square. So there's physical challenges in using the paper, solving the problems, evolving the process, and that drives the subject matter to be resolved. And these are some of the final pieces. Using on the left, a hungry ghost, and on the right there, a mask like our COVID masks that we're wearing. And the ellipses are in most of these pieces, the wrapped words. I'm also doing a series of Hungry Ghosts because I think earth, air, water, ether, this is the time during COVID when we've lost so many people. And in the Jain and Buddhist and Indian philosophy, they talk about figures that are taken too quickly. So then when none of that happened, I had to think about things differently. And I worked with Yuriko and Michael to do an artist book. The edition is 70 with 10 artist proofs. And it serves as a documentation. It's codified, so we didn't put all the lists of the names in the book, but the code in the beginning tells you what Yuriko's work is about, and it's all detailed enlargements, my work and Michael's work. And the cover was the same flax paper that was scored to be a geometric system. And there's 47 pages in the book. It was printed by Brown Printing Company in Portland, Oregon. This is Yuriko's night watch bell. And it's one light bulb, and she burnt Trump's tweets every day. She was so angry about Trump. And she put them between resin and had one light bulb that would light up the tweets. And so this is a pun on Paradise Lost, Paradox Lost. This is the back cover of the book. So far, this book is in the RISD museums. It's going to Smithsonian, George Mason, Colgate, Clark Institute. So it turned out to be a good documentation for the three of us during COVID when a show was canceled. And I'm very interested in Reading Road Studio conserving documentation, not only the work itself, but our conversations. So for me, Reading Road Studio is documenting a period of history for artists within our community, as well as their individual experimental discoveries. And this is the studio before it was damaged. You see here on the right, Ellen Hill doing a large piece, and on the left, visitors from Renwick, 24 people came, and I did a workshop. Randy Reese McCormick is a very interesting artist from Baltimore who works as a painter, and what she did was use Photoshop to break down 10 layers out of her painting to work in pulp with liquid colors and build up a surface that looked like painting. So what did I do during COVID also that I could document, like Cheryl was showing you? Because of cancellations, Hand Papermaking featured an article. I was on a panel at the New York Center for Book Arts. I was in a symposium for Rutgers. I was in a symposium for North American Papermaking Association. I did 10 webinars with international speakers through webinars in India, and many newsletters about what was happening from March all the way to last month. And that's how I felt I could use documentation of this period of time. And then my studio crashed. So Bill Roseberry is on the line, and so is Tom Nakashima. And Bill is very serious in conversation about documentation, and I hope he'll give a shout out somewhere in the question and answer period. We had a talk on the weekend. He's documenting Betsy Packard, Tom Nakashima, and Rhea Bonachak. And we both believe there's weaknesses that understandings that we should investigate, understand. And then what are the needs for documentation within our community? So the issues are that art students don't learn the importance of archiving their work. I never learned that. And I still think today that's a problem. Artist histories are lost due to displacement. You migrate from one studio to another, and then we lose that history. Artists cannot finance and document and archive their own histories. They don't have the means. And artists leave the process to others, usually family members, and they're not self-reliant in the process. As Cheryl was saying, you have to be self-reliant in the process. So someone is left with the work. The need, we think, is to make a comprehensive digital Washington, D.C. area visual arts archive, a database, historical and geographical timeline. And what that would be is a depository to tell the story of the artists in the DMV communities in a non-commercial registry, not about sales and marketing, but a historical record, a consortium, perhaps educational program with internships, maybe George Washington University, George Mason, McLean Project for the Arts, Hamiltonian, Howard, Martin Luther King Library, and that it should be a democratic approach and ethical funding for the project. So Bill has told me about artworkarchive.com. Please look that up. He's working very hard on that and very dedicated to this concept. And if you'd like to contact me, just take a screenshot. This is where you can see my work. The old archive website, I don't know, I might let go of it. You know, you get in that position. What do you do when you create a new website? And that's another area of discussion about documentation. And if you want to submit to the College of Pa, I created something called the Environmental Situation Room during COVID, where any artist from anywhere in the world could submit work, and we put it up on Instagram. Thanks a lot.
Wow, thank you so much, Helen. This was fantastic.
Big questions. Who are we? Where are we? And what are our stories? That's documentation.
Thank you,
Helen-
thank you. And we,
Okay.
oh, I was just gonna say, we've already got some great questions. Do you wanna get us started, Joan,
I'll
or?
let you, I certainly will let you raise the questions. I just wanted to add, I just wanted to say thank you myself for both of our presenters. I think they were wonderful, and I really appreciate, Helen, your connecting your experience and your work with the whole conversation about documentation, both the why and the how. And it was a wonderful presentation. So thank you both very much.
Yes, thank you.
So, and if you wanted to open up with the questions, and we'll open the floor with the.
Yeah, so let's get started with questions from the chat. And just a quick apology that there was a little bit of a Zoom bomb there, but that's been removed. So thank you again for everyone for understanding. You know, we had a really good question about technology change and what's the best way to save things like video for your archives, and if anybody has any insight
I was
on
also
that,
going to add emails, because a lot of correspondence with a lot of the folks that, for example, I'll correspond with is an email, and it goes back and forth, and you don't remember to save it or print it out. So have you given any thought to that?
Well, I think emails is the new correspondence. I'll often refer to letter writing as the lost art of correspondence. It has been replaced by emails as well as texting. So I think anything that's pertinent to a particular piece of artwork that you've created, or a particular exhibit or sale of art that you have, you know, found yourself involved in, that becomes a part of your archives.
Mhm.
One thing I forgot to mention, I mean, I know a lot of us, our process begins with a sketch. Those sketches are archival material, and they should not be just saved in any folder. They should be saved in an acid-free folder so that they exist. So you should document your process as well. I think that's critical. So emails with whatever the technology may be, as long as we live and you're using that to get your work out there, to sell your work, to exhibit somewhere, that's what you save, that becomes an archive. Videos, you should save them. I don't know, you know, it's hard for me to tell you because, you know, I've watched so many things go from VHS to where we are now. You just try to keep up with that with the videos. And then if there is new technology, hopefully there will be a way that it can be converted.
Yes, I know. We just transferred the Washington Sculptors Group archives to DC Public Library, and I definitely gave over some boxes of VHS tapes. So hopefully they'll be, we'll have some relived content coming soon. But
I mean, my photographer, y'all probably know him because Greg Staley, I love Greg.
Yeah.
I've been using Greg for so many years. And what Greg used to give me was slides. Yeah, slides.
Slides.
Yeah. And then it went from slides to slides and a CV DVD. And now we're to wet transfer. But keep those slides. Keep those, that's part of your archive.
Yeah.
That's right, slides.
I'm going to ask everybody who's not going to be talking at the moment, please mute themselves again, because we're getting an echo effect. So if you're not muted.
All right, I'm gonna mute all, and then we'll unmute.
Right, thank you. The other, I just wanted to, something.
Joan, that means you have to unmute.
I just did. When Helen mentioned artworkarchive.org, which is the first time I heard about that. Has anyone looked into Artline, which I think Jane Haslam was one of the first people when the digital world was growing. She started collecting images from artists in the community, and must have a phenomenal archive of DC artists' work from probably, I want to say, the late 70s and the 80s and 90s. So that would be I'm just sort of throwing that out there because I know that she was very, very active in that very early.
Artline is somewhat static as it has not been updated with new content in a number of years, from what I understand. So it stands as sort of a period archive through, say, 2016 or 17.
But it may be worth talking to them about merging that into this Artline, this
Well,
artwork archive.
And
But
this,
that's an aside.
this is maybe a good transition to their next question, which was, since ArtCart is shifted their thing or has a waiting list, do you know if there are resources to get outside help that artists can look to?
Well, ArtCart does not have a waiting list. ArtCart had 2 cohorts of visual artists, and now they've shifted since Joan is retired from Columbia University, albeit the archive would still be housed at the Academic Commons at Columbia University. She's on the West Coast focusing on performance artists. And she has a huge, she'll be doing that. That may be the rest of her project because they stop working much sooner than we do as visual artists. The thing that you can get outside help would be to get an intern. We have these art schools and universities. I currently have an intern from George Mason helping me with other projects, but I would just start with the intern. The first basic thing to do is to make sure all of your work is photographed. And perhaps you get an intern out of the photography school to come do that. They don't have to be in depth. You need to capture the image and so people know that it existed.
Great, thank you. And I think this has already come sort of back up, is just that being able to change, format things through through email and stuff. So keeping a hold of that in different ways.
There's also a lot of, without promoting anyone, there's also a lot of free online software for this purpose. So if you search around, you have something to start with. But my very first thing to tell you is to make sure everything is signed, all your artwork is signed, and make sure everything is photographed.
And another great question that relates to that is, are there any ethical sort of implications of, keeping track of this, keeping these communications with outside people? Do you have any need to notify anyone?
No, because they wrote it to you. So you're in possession of it. They wrote it to you. I mean, I guess there may be a moral if, like if you want to disclose. I mean, I read Jack Whittington's book In the Woodshed, and there were a lot of things he left out because he said they would kill him. The other artists would kill him. But all of those things are a part of his archive. And quite certainly, anything you write on email, you write on Facebook, presume that the public can see it. It's not private.
Yeah. Oop, another more technical question, are there any sort of standards for archiving work with photography, sort of like DPI and length and width and that kind of stuff? Which taking a wild guess, the answer is probably not. But did they tell you anything on the
But I think particularly for photographers, they need to be very cognizant of their rights under the copyright law. And there is an advocacy group here called Copyright Alliance, that they're a lobbyist group for all genre of artists to make sure that the laws are legislated to protect our work. And so, but you still have to start up with the image. And if you're a photographer, you then need to make sure that you know the date that it was created, and if there were any titles, and where it's been exhibited, and so forth and so forth. It's the same grunt work, as how I described it. It's the same grunt work.
and here's an interesting question. Do artists curate their archives? Oh, and it moved. Let's see. And would you include every single item you've ever created?
Yes, I would. That's your story, whether you like all of it or not. That's the part of your creative journey.
I'll say this is
necessarily
probably where
mean-
different artists come up with very different answers.
Yeah, maybe Helen. Helen, what do you do? What do you think?
I'm just starting, so I'm a bad example.
But you did say that you're actually documenting even your experiments
Yeah.
and what didn't work, because that's part of your process that
Yeah.
would be very useful.
Very much so. And I would say something about video. I mean, in terms of archiving it, there's a good question I saw in the chat. How do you archive video? But when I had my videos made, I hired a professional videographer, and she came for 2 days in a very hot summer day with my essayist for the book, Buzz Spector, so that we could get comfortable with each other. And then she has the copies, I have the copies, he has the copies, and we all put it up in different ways. I have it on my website. I'm not sure how you archive, but it was an MP4 and I had it done professionally so that it would be high resolution and so forth. Probably someone else on here understands.
On your computer or wherever it's accessible, that you can use it.
Yeah, I guess that's what.
And then you document it and on your Excel spreadsheet when you made it, what date it was made it, who did it, and where it's located.
And actually, we noticed even on the photographs that we used for the announcement that you also want to apply credits for the
Absolutely.
photographer or the videographer, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and just everybody, other people are putting great sort of their experiences in the chat, which is really great.
One of the things I wanted to just sort of ask again, and I'm sorry for being sort of dull-witted about this, is the question of emails. Because there are so many, do you try to save them electronically in some way, like a flash drive or some sort of separate way, or do you just print them out in paper and put them in a file folder somewhere?
Well, I'm kind of old school. I would print them out. I mean, because I've had computers crash on me.
Thank you.
And I get a lot of emails. So I'm going to pick out the pertinent one, pull it out, put it in the folder or the location with the work that it's talking about.
Right.
So everything's in one spot.
Thank you.
You
Okay.
can also save the emails, and you can also just do go to print and then have the option of save as a PDF. And that's what I do a lot of times. If there's an email I want to save, then I have it electronically. I don't have a lot of paper, but I have it as a PDF and I can always pull it out, and it has the headers and the date and the
Right,
time.
interesting. Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, that would be a way to do it, sure.
There's some very good comments coming up in the chat. Helen Glazer said there's something called the Dam Book by Peter Crow. Stands for Digital Asset Management, aimed at photographers, but it has a lot of good ideas for organizing images on a computer and backing them up.
Terrific.
Someone else was saying, Gail Rebin, that you should always have 3 copies of anything. So these are good things that are coming up in the chat. Let's save the chat so people can.
Oh yeah, we'll do that. because there is really good, and people are, talking about programs they've used or looked into. So there's a lot of great stuff from each other here. So
I think these programs, by the way, Annie, are on YouTube.
yes, they will go on YouTube. So, and just there is another conversation that sort of links back also that Robin Moore did last year. So that's another good resource, and that's on our YouTube channel. And this will go up on our YouTube channel in the near future.
And can I ask one other question? I want to ask of any of the gallerists or art advisors who might be on the program, if there's any software that you use for collecting the data and collecting the information. I see Mary's hand up. That it would be very useful for some of us to know. So Mary, would you share that with us?
Yeah, and I just put a few notes in the chat for a few websites, and there are so many database tools available depending on the complexity of your needs. You can choose one that's free, that suits your needs, or very little cost, or like a monthly or annual subscription. You can also choose something very expensive that can have, web access, mobile device access, desktop, laptop, be archived to the cloud. I have used FileMaker for over 20 years for tracking artwork and consignments and sales and everything. I have kept a database for my artwork for decades now, and every artwork that goes to an exhibition or is used in an application for a grant or submission to a show is included in my database. So it gets a photograph, it gets measurements, dimensions, details. I track exhibitions, so if I need to assemble a provenance for a work, all the information is there. You can start simple and just get complex as you have the energy and the tools to do so. So Cheryl reiterated that you could do this all in a spreadsheet, and that is true, and that is the best way to start. So you would create a spreadsheet with artwork title, date created, medium, dimensions, notes. You can create a notes field. Then you would create a field for disposition, meaning location, storage, gallery, at home, loan to a friend. If you collect all your data and all of a sudden you have a spreadsheet with 150 lines in it, then you're ready for database, and you can upload that Excel spreadsheet into a customizable database of your choosing. So you don't need to spend thousands of dollars on a database product. You just need Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets or something like that. So there are plenty of resources on this Zoom today, people who can help you go from that first step. I've met artists who have a recipe box and every artwork has a file card, and that works too. There's a shoe out there for every need, so from free to not free, and there's reasons why the ones that cost money cost money. If you decide to buy FileMaker for, I think, $300 or $400 a year, you can regularly upgrade when you choose, every couple of years or more often if you want to. And then you can customize that database to do exactly what you want it to do, to produce catalog pages or consignment sheets or information pages, fact sheets, all that kind of stuff. So I love to talk about databases. So hit me up.
I love artists that love to talk about databases. So Sally, it looks like you maybe had some suggestions. You have a hand raised.
Oh, I see that you've recommended, Mary, Artwork Archive, which I started about 3 months ago. So I have like 25 minutes to put into it, and it's fairly simple. I think it cost me $100 for the year, and you can enter and enter and enter all kinds of data. But there's a lot of complexity to it because they take you everywhere that you can imagine. You need to have a lot of important data, and I have never done this before. So for me, it's incredible. Just locating photographs that go back years ago and trying to put them in And to remember sizes and
Mhm.
all the data, it's frightening to think of how much you don't remember. And as I'm kind of getting up there in years, I'm remembering less. So it's making life much more difficult, but I can agree that you have to do it, because without it, I mean, you just cannot remember the details. You know, we're all so intimate with our art, and it's almost impossible to think that you might not remember the name of a piece or two.
Right.
And I'm at that point, and it's getting frustrating. So I agree 1,000% with what everyone said, that you have to do it. And if you haven't started, you have to start it. I started with FileMaker Pro myself, Mary, and it was even before that they would accept photos. And so I walked away from that. And I find that this artwork archive was so simple that anybody could do it. So I opted for that. And I thought the price was more than worth it.
The software, I'm sorry, Jerry, the software is called Artwork Archive?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Can I ask
Sorry,
another?
Sally's
can
had her hand up. Do you want to say
Can I
something,
sneak
Sally?
in another question before somebody else is, because I'm noisy? My question is, a lot of gallerists over the years did not let artists know what collectors had bought their work. Is that changing? Because I think, is it important for part of the archive to know?
I'll tell you, I mean, every artist and gallerist have their own contract and their own agreements. So nobody's agreements are the same.
Right.
And I know that I have worked at Soul in a gallery in Philadelphia, and they didn't tell me, the owner. So that's okay. They're concerned about, they've covered their collectors. But
Okay.
you do know where it was sold. You know
Yes.
what city it was sold. You know what month it was sold. You know what gallery sold it. So you can point a possible researcher in the direction to find out missing information if they want it.
Okay. Thank you. I'll defer to the next question in line.
Okay. All right. I'll just take, I think we have Sally and then,
Oh, okay. I
there
was
you are.
Yeah, I was just going to say a couple of things. Cheryl mentioned reviews, and so many of them, and publications, and so many of them are online. Aside from one thing of saving them as a PDF for your own records, another thing that's important is there's a source called PermaCC, and what you can do, I think it's actually run by the library at Harvard, and what you can do is create a permalink so that it doesn't disappear, because you know how often, there's this huge problem that so much stuff basically just disappears from the web. And this is a program that they run to try to create essentially a sort of permanent archive. It's similar to the Internet Archive, and you can actually become a member and save a number of permalinks per month for free, or you can, if you're somebody who really has a lot to do, you can subscribe for a pretty small fee and be able to create these permalinks. So essentially that gets it archived in a way and gives you a different link. So that's a good resource. That's all I was going to.
And
It's
that's called permalink?
Yeah, well, it's called PermaCC, literally.
Perma?
Perma, PERMA .cc. We'll find it. Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's a very good, it's basically part of dealing with this problem that so much disappears on the web.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank you. I was gonna say, I think we're winding down on the questions, but I want to give a short plug for all the great members here of the Washington Sculptors Group. And again, thank you, Helen and Cheryl. And, I'm giving a plug here for renew your membership, please. It's that time of year. And we have a lot of great programs coming up. We have another members happy hour on March 16th at 7 p.m. So that's fun if you just want to chat and hang out and share what you're up to. We are going to have another professional program on pricing your artwork, which I know is always a hot button topic for everybody. That comes up on, that'll be on March 22nd. And our Fleeting Flood show a year later, but is finally going to open at the end of March. So we'll have data about that. And I saw that a bunch of people started registering already, but we had our call go out for our annual image show, which is back this year online. So a plug for all our great things. And I think if there aren't any more questions, we can open it up for chatting.
And
Oh, Joan, do you have something to add first?
no, I just wanted to say thank you all, and I'm sort of amazed that we actually kept our timeline. And so
I know. This is such a great program. It was just fantastic. Thank you so much, Helen and Cheryl.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting.
Thank you all for joining us. And the program now is an after party, which means we'll open the microphones and we can all talk to each other and probably all talk at once. But we look forward to that conversation. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to change to gallery view and see everybody. So I'm going to throw out the question, did this inspire you or did this worry you? And who wants to react?
Well, Joan, I'll take that one. I've never been so happy that I've only been an artist for 10 or 11 years. Because I can't imagine going back to the beginning if one has been an artist for decades and doing this. But I'm really inspired to start collecting things like emails that I've been so negligent about.
Yeah. One of the things that was reported in the art card experience in people in older, more senior artists working with the interns and the students, and it's a whole educational